Hello, Internet fans. It's your old pal Rotten Roger DeMarco here from 3bproductionco.com. And this week, we're going to be looking at Jon Ward's 1999 film, Lover's Lane. So, in December, I did a bunch of Christmas-themed movies. And then January happened, and January, nothing really cool happens. So, now it's February. You want to show your girlfriend or your boyfriend some gnarly, nasty horror films while you're trying to get into their pants? That's what I'm here for, because this month I have a handful of horror films that are all Valentine-based. You guys can get freaky-deaky in the backseat of the car or whatever you gotta do, but first, watch these films that I'm gonna recommend. I'm gonna be super honest with you. I am gonna be completely blown away if there are some of you out there who even remember this film. It kind of came and went. It was a direct-to-video slasher film that was here, disappeared, now it's out of print, it's expensive as shit, so here is the plot breakdown. 13 years ago, a killer with a hook for a hand shows up at Lover's Lane and kills two people who are fooling around. And then the police capture him. Fast forward 13 years, the same killer has escaped from the mental institution, the mental institute, the building where they hold crazy people. He escapes and comes back to his hometown and starts slaughtering, fornicating teenagers all across the land. Before we get into my overall thoughts of this film, first, let's take a look at
Ryan Rogers! Splatter facts.
We have 14 dead bodies. We have 4 titties. We have 1 hip-ass bowling montage. We have gratuitous PDA. And we have 1 dead dog. Yep, sorry. The methods of death include, but are not limited to, off-screened, slashed, hooked in the puss, and stabbed. Now on to my overall thoughts of this film. Like I was saying before, I know that a lot of people missed this movie. It didn't seem to have like a big home video push, and it wasn't until Scary Movie came out that this movie really started getting a push, because it actually stars Anna Faris. She is one of the teenagers in the film. And when Scary Movie made her a name, this film repackaged itself with a blood splatter on the front that said, starring Anna Faris from Scary Movie. It reminds me a lot of Cherry Falls. It's a lot like something like that, but with a lot less talent behind the camera. And I don't want to say too many negative things about it, but it feels very amateur. I'm assuming that Jon Ward is a big slasher film fan, and some of the things that he does in this movie go beyond being an homage. They become almost plagiarism. That's a slippery slope when it comes to the horror community, because we like a nod here and there. We really don't have issues with nods to other films. But when you are just blatantly ripping things off, there's some Hills Have Eyes stuff, some Halloween stuff, there's some Scream things that they put in there, very derivative of these other works. That works okay for the random rental, but that does not work well on a hardcore, like a seasoned horror fan who knows what they're looking for. That's my main gripe with this film, and some of the stuff gets a little muddy. Who is the villain? Why they are the villain? How many villains? It's really all over the place. It's like a Scooby-Doo episode. A lot of horror films did the whodunit slasher, the reveal with who's the killer. This film just seemed to miss that mark for me. I'm not saying it's not a fun movie, because it definitely is a fun film. You do have a decent body count, although we don't really get any carnage for the body count. We got a decent stack. We have 14 corpses in this film. A lot of the kills are either off-screen and you stumble upon a dead body, or it's like a very simple slash. Even the most gnarly of the kills, she gets her hatchet wound pierced with a hook. But even that, which is very gratuitous, grindhousey, nasty 80s style kill, I mean, they're giving it to us, but they shy away from it. If you're a fan of this channel, you know that I say I am a gore fan, but I'm not a fan of gore for the sake of gore. But sometimes, man, you want something gnarly. And it was right there. They had it, and they pulled back. Depending on what type of horror fan you are, that kill either works for you or works against you. This time, actually, I kind of wanted to see what was going on. I wanted to see some extra blood and some hoo-ha splitting. I don't want to sound like a pervert, but, you know, come on. It really has that made-for-TV direct-to-video look, that grain, that amateur lighting, a lot of things that are happening you're missing because it's so dark, and you're just like, turn on the lights, let me see what's happening. There's scenes that are supposed to be nighttime that are shot day for night that are very distracting, and then there's stuff that they actually filmed at night that they did not light properly. It's sort of a mixed bag, and when you're watching the film, you go through this roller coaster ride in the final act where the sun is coming up, the sun is down. It's one of those. It does sort of suck you out of the story, but at the same time, the story is very simple. A dude with a hook is fucking killing teenagers at a place called Lover's Lane where they all get together and party and make out and stuff. We don't necessarily need it to look like $1 million, but it can really hurt the longevity of the film because it's a movie that you see once and you go, okay, got that out of the way. I tend to watch it once a year. Over the years, I've come to appreciate the flaws in this film. It's very much so a time capsule of that late 90s. Everyone has bleached blonde tips, and with gel with the part, all the boys kind of look like the older brother from Home Improvement. You know, they all kind of have that look about them. They're not quite Jinko jeans yet, but they're bigger skater jeans, and really holds on to that time period. It's a little nostalgic to go back 20 years later and go, whoa. It has that very, like the town that dreaded sundown, almost like a mockumentary feel at the beginning. Very grainy. It tricks you. With the grain and the bad lighting at the beginning of the film, you feel like you're gonna get that voyeuristic, documentary-esque feel, mockumentary horror film. It's really just a result of poor lighting. Not a good start to your February, folks. Things about it that really bother me. There's a kid, and they're getting ready to leave the high school. They're getting ready to go have this party, and one of the kids is like screaming, "Woo, we're gonna have a party, doo-dow!" Kid's running around like a fucking idiot at the school, and he's got a six-pack inside of his shirt. Like a fucking tool. I was never really a party guy, but I don't imagine that you're taking a six-pack to school so you can leave school with it. There's a million other places for it. They're obviously in high school. They have cars. They have bedrooms. It's a ridiculous scene in the movie. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, what fucking 17-year-old kid takes a six-pack to school just so he can leave school with it? That seems like an unnecessary risk. You're partying wrong. You're doing it stupid. And then also Anna Faris, she's a new girl to the school, and she makes the cheerleading squad. And they kind of cram that down your throat, but then she never, ever changes. She's in her fucking cheerleader outfit the entire time. Movies fall into that archetype all the time where they define a jock, define a nerd, define a cheerleader, define a slut. And this movie actually takes it a step further by letting her wear the cheerleader outfit the entire time. She's the new cheerleader. Here she is, and she never changes her clothes. The character development is almost non-existent, so you don't really feel anything for any of these characters. But that can be okay because this is just a movie to pump up numbers. This is just a background flick filled with cannon fodder characters. It's not Gone with the Wind. It's not even Slaughter High. It's a lower tier direct-to-video horror film, but it's holiday based, so it belongs in February. I also think that it's very strange that when the killer escapes, he like scrawls in blood, "Prison food sucks," in his jail cell, in his holding cell. And then throughout the movie, the police find scrawled in blood on random walls, "Prison food sucks." Think back to every slasher film I've ever seen. Think back to any of the other interesting killers that you've ever seen. And when they write something in blood on a wall, it's usually something like a lot more impactful. You know, I think of like Exorcist 3, It's a Wonderful Life in blood. I think of fucking Helter Skelter. I think of A Message. You know, I think of something that is for shock value, something that is frightening to the viewer, and something like Prison Food Sucks gets a chuckle. Haha, hilarious. But why? Is he a cannibal? They don't say. No, he's not a cannibal. He just doesn't like prison food. Well, it seems like he's going out of his way an awful lot of times to tell someone that prison food sucks. The killer is an idiot and doesn't have any imagination. That really bothers me. That's the best you got? You're 7 minutes into the movie, that's the sign. You go, oh, this killer is not clever. So basically, yeah, I was referring to this movie throughout its runtime. I was actually calling it I Know What You Did last Valentine's Day the 14th. This is so silly and so derivative of all of these films that are otherwise great films, or even not even necessarily a great film. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer is not a great film, but it is a fully realized film, if that makes sense. It feels like when they made Lover's Lane, they had an idea, they got an investor, and they just shot a bunch of stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. I'm not trying to say that this is a complete waste of time. That is not the case. I feel like it needs to be seen. Some of the characters are kind of guilty of the worst decision making I've ever seen in the history of cinema. They are in a barn, they hotwire a car so that they can leave. They spend the time hotwiring the car. The killer is approaching them. They get the car started. They drive the car 10 feet, stop the car, put the car in park, get out and run. And I'm not making that up. That's a thing that happens in the movie. You have the car, you can leave. The killer is on foot and you get out and run. Why? And the resolution for the film is very muddy. It really tries to pull a page from Scream to give you that twist, that got you, what they twist. They get you with a twist, and then they're like, oh, what they twist, another twist. Then you're like, okay, 2 of them, I'm a little sick of it. And then they're like, oh, what they twist. They hit you with 3 twists, and you're like, I'm not playing anymore. I don't want to do this, no. And I almost check out at that point. You're just like, yeah, all right, I see what you're doing. I don't know that I care anymore. One of those things where enough is enough, and it feels like they're trying so hard to be clever and be creative, but while trying to be clever and creative, they're also pulling from a ton of source material. But like I said though, I feel like it is important. It is a movie that deserves to be seen, and you should seek this out and find a way to see it. And I'm not telling you to spend $30 on an out-of-print DVD. If I've swayed you to investigate this film, I'm sure there are means of discovery. You may be able to find it in the wild, dirt cheap. You definitely should look into this, especially if you are a person who wants to have holiday-themed slashers in your collection. It is definitely worth owning and definitely worth seeing, just to have that time capsule of that late 90s. You see where stuff started to go wrong with the slasher genre, because it was so oversaturated by the late 90s after Scream had that resurgence. Scream sparked everything and brought it all back, and it was fresh and fun and alive and self-referential, and then everyone started emulating it. And there's only so many Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer spin-off, rip-off type films one can digest before saying, okay, I've had enough, what is next? As much as Scream is responsible for sparking the resurgence of the slasher genre, I don't want to say that it's responsible for the decline in the slasher genre, but all the other assholes who tried to emulate that success are responsible for the death of the slasher film in the late 90s. Lucky for us, horror is making a comeback in a big way. In my personal opinion, as far as it goes with this film, I've got to give it 1 out of 5 blood drops, because the problems are so evident. I do believe that it is an important film to have in your library, just for like preservation's sake. You're gonna want to have it so you can say that you have it. You're gonna want to be able to take it off the shelf and introduce a friend to it and go, Jesus Christ, what were they thinking? Become an inside joke between you and your circle of horror friends. But like I said in a couple of other videos, my word is not gold. So you can take my recommendation and then form your very own opinion about these films. And that's what's so good about the horror community, is that you get to decide if this is in your wheelhouse, if you really like this or if you really hate this, and then we can discuss it further. So in my personal opinion, it is worth 1 out of 5 blood drops. And I suppose I should probably get going, because after all, there's a lot of movies out there and somebody's got to watch them. So why not me, right?